we've got another one. The low-profile mechanical keyboard hits simply keep coming this year. This is the MelGeek O2, a new 75% board with a Mac-inspired design, but don't worry, it plays nice with PC as well. In addition to the design, you are not going to want to miss the rather unique feet that they put on this thing and the impressive typing. However, MelGeek makes some really big claims around 8-device connectivity and around battery life in the thousands of hours. Pretty wild assertions that we're going to have to validate, and which had some complications in testing, which helped to delay this review for several months. So yeah, you're not going to want to miss the full details in this video. MelGeek did send this over to me for review, but had no say in the contents of this video. They also were gracious enough to provide my audience with a 5% savings on their website if you use code Cameron. Now with all of that out of the way, let's jump into the details. As mentioned, this design is intended to bring you back to the days of clear Mac computers, but there's nothing about this keyboard that prevents you from enjoying it with a Windows PC or even with Linux. Simply swap in the included Windows keycaps and you're good to go. For Mac users though, you'll feel right at home with the layout, including a matching function row and even the perfectly matched sizing on some of the buttons like Escape and Delete, which mirror the setup on the MacBook Pro or the Apple Magic Keyboard. The board comes exclusively in this white color with orange and blue accent keys. There is an aluminum top case, which is really just this tiny little strip of metal around the outside of the keys, so it's more of an accent piece than anything else. Then there's a clear polycarbonate side and an ABS plastic bottom, both of which are beautiful, smooth, and soft to touch, but also prompt some questions on long-term durability. Though the clear plastic looks incredible out of the box, I'm slightly worried about yellowing over time for this type of material. You've probably seen this with a clear plastic phone case at some point, whether yours or someone else's. The good news is that typically that yellowing is driven by both heat and UV light, which most people's keyboards won't encounter. I asked MelGeek about this directly, and they admitted that it's a risk if your keyboard is subjected to heat and UV light. So if you plan to have your keyboard outside or in direct sunlight in some way, shape, or form, then you might want to go in a different direction. Another small concern with the clear plastic and the white plastic on the bottom is that these materials show fingerprints really easily and seem like they might have a bit of a static attraction to dust and hair as well. I'm also concerned that the soft plastic materials might scratch easily, which could make it look more worn over time than another keyboard would. On the flip side, the benefit of this plastic construction is that it's light. Mine weighed in at about 660 grams, or just under 1.5 pounds, just slightly heavier than the low free flow light for some context. Overall, this design is a statement, but probably not for everyone. It does look a little bit juvenile, which is fine if that's what you're into, and I'm sure some people will totally love this look. Personally, I was more impressed than I expected out of the box, but the more time I spent with it, kind of the less that I liked it. I'm not a huge fan of clear electronics just to begin with, and on top of that, I've struggled with their choice of font. It's funky with some really rounded letters and even an O that looks much more like a 0 for some reason, which is kind of ironic for a board that's called the O2, so named for the atomic symbol of oxygen, but which will inevitably be confused countless times for a model number of 02. Let me know what you think of the design. It's definitely not my favorite, but I feel like I may very well wind up in the minority there. I'm not really sure. Next, I wanted to talk about the keyboard's feet. I don't usually have a full section devoted to keyboard feet and to typing angle, but here I think it was actually warranted. The feet used are really cool. There's some slim orange rubber feet at the bottom of the board and some slightly thicker blue ones at the top. Then there's these removable rubber blocks, which magnet into a small slot when not in use, and then can be placed on top of the primary feet, again with magnets, to provide a higher typing angle. This setup is very reminiscent of the removable feet on the original Newfie Air, but these have the added bonus of being able to be stored in the keyboard to avoid losing them. The magnets are strong, but you can absolutely launch these feet if you wind up getting bumped or caught on something. For typing angles, the default angle is 3.5 degrees, and by adding the rubber blocks, you can move up to 5 degrees. Fairly low compared to some competing brands, but I had no issue typing comfortably, and the flatter angles do tend to be better for ergonomics. I also wanted to talk about putting this keyboard on top of a MacBook, since that's shown multiple times on the product page, and since this is a direct competitor to the Newfie Air series, and that one is designed so perfectly for using on top of a MacBook, does this really compete in that way? Now, the important note is that the MacBooks that they use in their imagery are the larger 16-inch models. Here, for some context, is the keyboard on top of my 14-inch MacBook Pro. Now, the feet on the bottom of this keyboard do work, kind of. At the base of the board, the orange feet very closely resemble the Air feet used by Newfie, which slot into the space around the Mac keyboard to keep it in place. However, on the O2, they're set up too wide for my 14-inch model, extending beyond the little crease that it should set into. Unfortunately, I think that the same would be true on the 16-inch model, since the keyboard is the same size and you're really just adding larger speaker grills to the outside. On the top of the board, the vertical pads sit fully outside of the keyboard area, and if you use the larger blocks, they'll also make contact outside of the typing area and then just sit slightly above the keys. Just note that using the higher angle might wind up blocking some of your screen depending on the angle that you sit at. So if you're a MacBook user who loves typing on a better keyboard over your regular one, it's totally possible here, but it's definitely not as optimized as what Newfie has been doing. Overall though, these feet are a really cool innovation, and I'm happy to see it. Next is the typing experience, which is excellent. The keycaps are die-sub PBT, which should hold up well over time. They have a concave shape, which is great to type on. You don't get a choice of switches. Every board comes with the linear Kailh Sunlight switches. They have the same design as the ones used by Low-Free and iQnix, so you have a lot of options if you want to swap them out. I actually made a short that was showing the subtle differences between each of the switches that I had that worked with this keyboard, if you're interested. Inside the board is a polycarbonate plate, a gasket mount, and multiple layers of foam and padding, resulting in a very good sound. However, the keyboard is Apple-inspired, and in true Apple fashion, it's actually impossible to take the keyboard apart to do any modifications or make changes without damaging the board. Now that is an Apple product if I've ever heard of one. Multiple other YouTubers reached out to MelGeek and got this confirmation, so yeah, this one is not meant to be modded. Thankfully, I don't think it really needs many mods. Here's a typing test. Typing feels soft and smooth. The sound is on the quieter side with a nice poppy sound to it. One of the most remarkable aspects of this board is definitely the spacebar, which has a thick piece of foam underneath. It almost looks like something that you'd put together as your own modification, but this is exactly how it came, and the effect is incredibly impressive. This might be the best spacebar I've used. Not only does it not sound hollow or rattly, it doesn't feel hollow or rattly at all, it's excellent. Comparing it to some other popular competitors, it's quieter and softer than the iQnix MQ80 with a little bit less rattle on the stabilizers. Part of that difference certainly comes down to the plastic case here compared to the full metal one on iQnix. It's really close to the typing experience on the Low-Free Flow Lite, just slightly louder than the Hades switches, since these ones aren't full-on silent switches. But the O2 has a better, more consistent spacebar and an overall very pleasing sound, even though it's slightly louder. Compared to Newfie's new Air 75 V3, it's actually quite similar. The spacebars are very close, the typing is pretty similar. The big difference is that you don't get an option for switches. So even though MelGeek's Sunlight switches are on the quieter side, you can't get silent switches like the blush switches that you can on Newfie. Every keyboard that I just talked about there is excellent to type on, and there are people out there who would have preferences for each one of them. The fact that this keyboard joins those ranks is a testament to what an incredible job they've done here in terms of typing experience. Kudos to MelGeek on that accomplishment. Next, let's talk about connectivity, where we have the first of our very big claims for MelGeek. The O2 can handle Bluetooth, has an included 2.4 gig USB receiver, and has a wired connection option as well. Nothing particularly remarkable there. The bold claim is actually within the Bluetooth connectivity. Now, it's common for keyboards these days to offer multi-device Bluetooth, giving you the ability to connect to 3 different devices and usually switching between them with a key combination. This keyboard can not only connect to 3 devices, but it can allegedly connect to up to 8 different devices via Bluetooth, using function plus 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 8 to swap between them. Now, this is wild since I've never seen a keyboard go over 3. I'm not sure that many people actually have use cases above 3 devices. Even just remembering which one of the 8 spots you paired your device to could be challenging. When I first got the keyboard, I asked MelGeek how this all worked, wondering if they leveraged some new Bluetooth spec that I wasn't aware of. The response I got was, "This is made possible through our proprietary algorithm, which optimizes connectivity, performance, and memory management. It's not dependent on a specific Bluetooth spec alone, but rather a combination of custom software tuning and hardware optimization." All right, so basically they wrote their own code to manage it, and they're either more clever than other keyboard manufacturers out there, or none of the other companies bothered to do it since 3 is enough for most people. That's what I thought, at least, until I actually tested it. Now, I want to give MelGeek the benefit of the doubt here, but put simply, my keyboard's multi-device Bluetooth pairing simply does not work. I can pair to a computer successfully, so Bluetooth itself does work, but then if I pair to a second computer using a different number on the keyboard, I can no longer go back to the original device. I can only ever get the most recently paired device to work. I tried everything I could think of, using Mac, using Windows, even using iOS. I tried factory resetting the keyboard. I even tried turning it off and turning it back on, believe it or not. After I ran out of ideas, I recorded a full video of my issue and shared it with MelGeek to try to get support. Now, I assume that this is either a bug in their software or a defect with my specific keyboard, both of which happen to the best of companies and are usually fixable. What matters, though, is how they choose to handle issues like this, and my experience has been subpar to say the least. The best summary of what I've gotten is basically this. Our advertising promotion said that O2 can potentially connect up to 8 devices simultaneously, which may indeed deviate from reality. However, we have conducted rigorous tests before daring to label it in this way. The reason for this might be that the connection capabilities of each device vary. Potentially 8 devices? Capabilities may vary? Advertising promotion may deviate from reality? I don't know if any of these were maybe lost in translation, but I sure hope that these aren't true statements. Contrast this to their website, which reads, "Effortlessly connect up to 8 devices for seamless multitasking." So which one is it? I can only speak from my personal experiences. I watched other reviews out there and found no one reporting similar situations, but I also didn't see anyone specifically stating that they did any sort of rigorous testing of the multi-device claims, which is kind of normal since you wouldn't expect a claim like this would be wrong. Now, if I were in MelGeek's shoes, I probably just would have sent a second review unit and written the first one off as faulty. Assuming that one worked, I still would have mentioned this experience to you guys, but this section of the video would have been a whole lot different. Ultimately, I know that my experiences working with brands is going to be different from the ones that you receive as a regular customer. As a general rule, for better or for worse, I expect that brands will probably provide me with better service than they provide you because they want to do whatever they can to get a positive review. In this case, after I delayed this review for several months trying to see if we could figure out a solution to the problem, I was then pressured to publish the review, even if it was going to include this negativity, so here you go. I never did receive an explanation, a recommendation, anything really. Just a few troubleshooting questions and the summary I shared earlier. Clearly, something went wrong with this keyboard, and that means it could happen to your board too. If this is the level of service that I got, I have pretty low hopes for what you'd get if you were in the same boat. But hey, since the keyboard does still work with the USB receiver, the wired connection, and one of the Bluetooth connections at a time, I will carry on with the review and I'll let you determine how much to weigh this experience into your purchasing decision. I'm very curious to read your thoughts about the situation in the comments, and also let me know if you think I should have handled it any differently. I tried to be as fair and respectful as I could through the whole thing, but I want to make sure that all of you don't think I'm either being too hard on them or too soft on them. Please let me know. All right, so moving on, polling rates are solid, standard 125 Hz over Bluetooth with 1000 Hz for the wired connection and the included 2.4 gig USB receiver that looks like a Lego, interestingly. Not really sure why, but kind of cool. The only caveat with those polling rates is that they require the right power profile to be in use. More on that in a second. Next, MelGeek advertises that the keyboard won't miss any keystrokes during sleep wake-up. As someone who is a big stickler for sleep-to-wake performance, this was music to my ears, and for the most part, this claim was realized. This keyboard is always ready to go in a way that I'd really only previously experienced from Logitech products. The only exception was after leaving this keyboard for an extended period of time, specifically in the low power mode. Again, more on power profiles soon, I promise. It seems like there's a regular sleep mode and then a deep sleep mode. In that deep sleep mode, it takes a couple seconds to wake up in low power mode, and in that case, some keystrokes are missed. But that's honestly totally excusable during regular use, and even when you leave for lunch or a rather extended break and then come back, this thing is pretty much always ready to go. For operating systems, everything is supported from Mac to Windows, plus Linux, iOS, and Android. Switching between Mac and Windows modes is done with Function plus S. Mac keycaps come pre-installed, Windows keycaps are in the box, along with a couple alternative function keys and one fun MelGeek logo key as well. Next, let's finally talk about those power profiles and the incredible battery life claims being made by MelGeek. The marketing for this keyboard indicates that it can get half a year of power on a single charge. 6 months is kind of crazy. Now they more specifically indicate 3,300 hours of use on Bluetooth and 1,800 hours with the 2.4 gig USB receiver. 3,300 hours is 137.5 days. Now, that is not some estimate of 8 hours per day or anything like that. No. 137.5 days of continuous battery life, just non-stop is what they're claiming. Now, if you used it for 8 hours a day, it's actually well over a year, 412.5 days to be precise. Now, MelGeek confirmed these advertised numbers when I reached out. I was honestly afraid they had added an extra 0 by mistake when I initially read them. So are these numbers an accurate representation of what you can expect from the 2,500 milliamp hour battery inside? Not that big of a battery. My answer is yes and no, and it's complicated, so let's break it down. As I mentioned, this keyboard has multiple different power modes. The crazy battery life claims are specific to the power saving mode that you can turn on with the MelGeek Hive app. These are not the expected numbers from the normal settings, known as office mode, or from the high performance mode, which is called game mode. And more specifically, power saving mode turns off all keyboard lighting, including the side lights and the small indicator lights up front. Plus, it limits your polling rate to 125 Hz on any connectivity mode. Office mode allows you to optionally use backlighting and ups that connectivity to 250 Hz. Finally, game mode keeps backlighting available as well and uses the full 1000 Hz capabilities in wired and 2.4 gig modes. Now, I tested this keyboard actively for 2 weeks with the goal of getting anywhere close to these crazy battery life claims. I intentionally left the keyboard on overnight to see how the power management did without me diligently powering the keyboard off every time I left. The first week, I turned off backlighting, but had not yet learned about the different power modes, so I ran it in the default office mode. At the end of that week, 16% of the battery was used, which would indicate about 40 days of use. The second week, I switched into low power mode, expecting that I wouldn't see that huge of a difference and that the claims might actually be wrong. But in fact, I was wrong. In a week's time, it only used 3% of the battery. That would mean 230 days of use, which is right up there with those crazy claims. I was honestly shocked. There's definitely some sort of back-end wizardry going on in the firmware of this keyboard to get those crazy battery life numbers, especially since the battery is only 2,500 milliamp hours in size. Unfortunately, I don't think there is enough creativity in the world to change the amount of power needed to light up 83 LED lights. So if you're all about the backlight, these crazy power numbers will quickly come back down to earth. To test battery life with backlighting, I enabled office mode with its 250 Hz polling. I started around midday with 85% on my battery. By 3 p.m., it was already down to 44%. By 6 p.m., it was down to 6%. So yeah, the battery life does indeed come back down to earth quick. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to dedicate enough time to test out all the possible combinations of power and backlight settings. I was obviously trying to chase down answers to the Bluetooth questions, and just generally, I wound up spending way more time reviewing this particular keyboard than I typically allot to one review. Now, MelGeek doesn't have numbers either on anything but low power mode or on anything with backlighting, but thankfully I was at least able to get something for you guys, but I apologize on them not being complete of every single possible combination. So at the end of the day, I'd say the marketing claims do kind of hold up here, just not all at once. You can probably get 3,300 hours of use, but not with backlighting and not with 1,000 Hz polling. But if you're okay with a non-backlit keyboard and standard Bluetooth polling rates, this keyboard will last a really long time. When it finally is time to charge, the included USB-A to USB-C cable is unique and really nice. It's 4 feet long and is a really silky smooth material, very reminiscent of the Anker Flow cable, which I love. The ends are well reinforced and include subtle touches like the MelGeek logo and some fun words for you. Plus, they even used orange on the side of the connectors to match the escape key, which is kind of a nice touch to make it all cohesive. Those last two sections of this video took way longer than usual, so to avoid this being an even longer video than my usual length, I'm going to speed run other functionality and features. There's north-facing RGB backlighting that's quite dim, and there are no shine-through keycaps. There's RGB side lights as well. Finally, there are 3 indicator lights on the front that are a bit hard to see, but they provide information for caps lock, battery levels, and connectivity. The function row matches the latest MacBook layout, but also lets you swap a few keys if you wish. F4 can be search or launchpad, F5 and F6 are dictation and do not disturb, and can be swapped for backlight brightness buttons instead. You can customize with the MelGeek Hive app. MelGeek's magnetic switch keyboards use a web interface version of Hive, but unfortunately this keyboard is not compatible and requires you to download the software onto your device. There are versions for Mac, Windows, and Linux, all of which are available for download from, you guessed it, Google Drive. Now typically my rule is not to download from Drive. However, with all of my connectivity issues, I broke my rule to try to get to the bottom of what was going wrong with connectivity. Now, the software lets you adjust key functions, customize backlighting, create custom macros, and manage those power settings, which are rather important for battery life. It's very wonky to use, and overall, it's just incredibly frustrating that I have to install it to get anything over 250 Hz polling or to use that low power mode in order to get the really good battery life. That shouldn't be the case. I need them to get the web interface working for this keyboard so that you don't have to do that. Okay, given everything that we've discussed, who is this keyboard actually for? Well, it's light and portable, great for work on the go, as long as that work isn't out in direct sunlight. It's an excellent keyboard to type on, and the design calls out for creative types who work on Macs throughout their day-to-day. But perhaps my top use case, I think this would be an elite keyboard for students. It's fun, it's light, it's portable. It could work for some late night gaming sessions if you wish, and it's great for typing out an essay. Bonus points for students or for graduates from Auburn, Illinois, UVA, Bucknell, or Syracuse who might identify with the orange and blue colors specifically. If you've got an affiliation with any one of those schools, you've got to let me know in the comments. My closest connection is going to a school directly down the road from Bucknell at the far superior Susquehanna University. Shout out Riverhawks. I'm obviously kidding, of course. I love Bucknell. The MelGeek O2 retails for $130. It's still pretty new, and there has been some form of discount available since launch, so you may be able to snag one for less. Currently, shipping to my address comes up as $19, which is a bit steep. You can also get it on Amazon, which has free shipping usually, but has a $10 upcharge. So depending on where you're located, you may be better off with one path or the other. I'll have affiliate links to both in the video description, and remember that you can save 5% on MelGeek's website with code Cameron, which might help to offset some of those shipping charges. Finally, let's wrap up with our differentiators and deal breakers. The design is super cool with the Mac-inspired clear plastic and simple look overall. As I said, it's not my favorite, but I recognize the effort that went into making this such a cool looking product. The feet are unique, functional, and very fun. Typing is smooth and quiet, plus the spacebar is probably the best I've ever used. The battery life is so insane that I didn't believe it, but it seems like 3,300 hours is actually maybe possible with the right settings. Sleep to wake is genuinely really good. Finally, there's 1000 Hz polling available if you do want to do some sort of gaming. For potential deal breakers, the first one is that the top specs advertised don't all work together, and some of them require installing the Hive software on your computer. For example, you can get crazy long battery life, but you need the software to enable low power mode. You can get 1000 Hz, but you need the software to enable game mode. And you can't get good battery life, backlighting, and 1000 Hz all at the same time. So you have to evaluate your priorities and your specific use cases to know if this will work or not. The 8-device Bluetooth would have been a really big positive if it worked. I'm sincerely hoping that I just have a dud of a keyboard, but my support experience was not inspiring. On top of those things, the backlighting is rather weak. I don't like the font, though that's very subjective. Finally, I've got some concerns about potential yellowing of the plastic in the long term. Just like with any product, this keyboard is not perfect, but darn if MelGeek didn't try to swing for the fences and honestly get pretty freaking close. The low-profile keyboard market continues to get stronger and stronger, and I'm thrilled to continue to share the ins and outs of each new board to you guys as they come. If you want to pick up one of these, there's affiliate links in the video description, and if you already have, let me know if your Bluetooth works. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.